When I started climbing, I was very, very bad at heel hooks. I would go as far as saying that I was so bad that I practically couldn't use them and invariably found another way to do the climb or the route. 3 years later, I'm still not fantastic at heel hooks, but I have spent the last 6 months really zoning in and focusing on this quite esoteric movement, quite specific to climbing, and I've gotten a little bit better at them, and that little improvement has had quite a dramatic effect on my climbing. I've got my heel hooks up to a point where I can legitimately use them as an actual technique for sending boulders or routes. And this improvement happened over a very short period of time and it was very noticeable in my climbing. And now I find myself using them all the time. When I'm sport climbing, I'm using them for resting or clipping. And when I'm bouldering, particularly indoors, I find myself using them to do the intended beta, to break the beta, to make up for my rather short stature. They have been incredibly useful and I'm so glad I learned how to use them just a little bit. So whenever I have a little burst of improvement in my climbing, a revelation if you like, I really like to reflect on what I did to get that improvement and see if I can replicate that for other aspects of my climbing. So how did I somewhat fix my horrendous heel hooks? So what were the problems? Well, there were a number of problems that really plagued me in my first 2 years of climbing that really prevented me from using heel hooks at all, really. The first issue I actually had was pain, really. Whenever I tried to engage a heel hook at the bouldering gym or something like that, I would feel this excruciating pain in my hamstring and at the back of my knee, and it really felt like there was an imminent rupture of something in my leg, and that was enough for me to just say, right, I don't want to even try this. If I just basically ignored that pain and gave it a go anyway, I found that I was really, really weak compared to other people. Like I really couldn't engage my hamstring in the way I wanted, and I just couldn't shift weight onto the heel. The next issue I clearly had was I just didn't really understand when I was supposed to use a heel. Like obviously at the gym I saw people trying heel hooks and I would give it a go, but I would never really fully comprehend why this heel works here and why it doesn't work in other places. And this would really affect my route reading because I wouldn't be able to spot heels from the ground. They would really creep up on me and I'd be like, oh, I don't know what to do now because I just don't really understand the mechanics of what a heel hook even does. And lastly, I found that if I actually did try the heel hook, that my technique was so poor that my foot would just pop off or it'd be too painful or I wouldn't be able to do anything from the heel, that it was just useless to me anyway. So I was really in this cycle of just not being able to use heel hooks, always trying to find a way around so I didn't have to use them, a perpetual cycle of incompetence, if you like. So what did I do to break the cycle? How did I fix this issue? The first thing I actually did to get out of this purgatory was actually not even related to climbing at all. I did a video for my main channel. Yes, I actually do have a main channel, which was about weightlifting. Basically, the goal was to deadlift 2 times my body weight. So I was really training deadlifts a lot. And as a side effect from that, you get strong hamstrings. So I think I went up to 140 kilograms on the deadlift. It took me quite a few weeks to get there. But then I noticed that my climbing around that time, whenever I actually did try heel hooks, that like feeling of like imminent rupture of some tendon in my hamstring somewhere, that I felt a little bit more robust. Like I felt like I could actually engage a little bit more. And I had just a foothold to actually start training heel hooks. The pain was a little bit less and I just felt a little bit less delicate. For the record, reflecting back on that deadlift exercise that I did of trying to deadlift twice my body weight, I actually recommend that nobody does that, especially not for climbing. I think 2 times your body weight is just way too intense. I think light deadlifts achieve 99% of what you need. And I was just putting myself in a zone of injury for no reason, really. That's a point of contention. Let's discuss, as always, in the comments below. Are heavy deadlifts useful? So what this like robustness in my hamstring allowed me to do was to actually start working on my heel hooks. And as always, I put them into my warm-up routine, 15 to 20 minutes, messing around on easy boulders. And what I did was a lot of unnecessary heel hooks, like stuff where heel hooks where you probably don't need it at all. In fact, you definitely don't. And I was just messing around, just trying to get my mind and body used to this weird movement of putting your heel behind someone and pulling in way. And I started doing that every session for 20 minutes before I started climbing. And this allowed me time to think about the issues I was having with heel hooks and how to address them. So issue one was not understanding why I am doing heel hooks, or not understanding the scenario where a heel hook would be useful. I know this sounds kind of dumb because some people just seem to really understand climbing movement. I'm not one of those people. I kind of have to think about it a bit more. I do have an intuitive sense of when a heel hook should be used, but I really didn't have like a concrete use case of when heel hooks are actually useful. And I actually had to sit down with pen and paper and think about like, why are we doing heel hooks? Because if I don't have this in my head, it really affects my route reading ability because I just can't spot them before I go up. And that's something I'm also trying to work on, my route reading. So I tried to come up for a generic definition of when you should actually be using heel hooks. Here's my best attempt, right? Heel hooks are useful when you can't move your knee behind the hold relative to the direction of force. So if you're wanting to push this way, but your knee's over there, your knee's in front of the direction of force, and you can't actually generate any force with your toe, so you have to use a heel. I know some people don't like thinking of things in this way, but this sort of thinking really helps me. Like, okay, that holds that way, I can't push with my toe, so I'm going to have to use my heel. This thought process allows me to recognize scenarios from the ground where I might need a heel hook, and this gives me the motivation to actually train them and get better at them. So what did I physically do to get better at heel hooks? Well, before that, a quick word from our sponsor. All right, guys, let's get real. Almost all of us climbers have the problem of stinky shoes. But the shoes have to go in the bag along with all our kit so we can get to the gym, and it makes everything smell bad. Well, finally, someone has thought of a solution to this problem. Megabeta has designed the ideal backpack for climbers. And the piece de resistance is the front pocket. The most important part is this material here. It's a smell-proof liner. The shoes go in there, the smell is contained and is separate from everything else in the centre of the bag. This is very much designed for the climber going to the gym. And with that in mind, it is ideal. We've got the classic roll top design that climbers like. It's got a little magnet in there so it clips together. Roll it up so you can kind of overstuff this if you need to. They've really thought about the internal design for this for climbers. More and more of us are actually working from the gym, so the bag has a perfect compartment for 15-inch laptop. There's a zipped pocket for your phone. There's this perfect little clip for your keys. We've got an internal water bottle pocket, a 24-litre total capacity, including the compartment for the shoes, and these side pockets here. Clearly, you can use it as a standard backpack, but actually, my favourite way to use it is to use these G-clips and actually disconnect the straps. The straps get tucked in the back here. Tuck these little bits in here, and then it goes into full tote bag mode. So the tote bag is officially in production. It launches in November 2025, and for just $1 you can reserve yours and you'll get 15% off if you do that. That lets Megabeta know how many of these they're expected to sell and reduces waste. So if you're looking for the best bag for your climbing gear for the gym, and especially if you have stinky shoes, check out the Megabeta tote bag. For only $1 you can reserve yours and you'll get 15% off when it releases in early November. Check out Megabeta, the link is in the description. The next issue to address was, why is my foot popping off this hold when other people can use the heel effectively? What am I doing wrong? And there was really two issues that I just wasn't understanding. The first was I was simply slapping my heel on hold and nothing was happening, and I was wondering why. And I realised that there was simply just no tension and my hips hadn't moved after placing the heel at all. The heel was just on, but it wasn't doing anything. I discovered that I really needed to properly pull and engage the hamstring and the glutes and actually put some tension on that heel, and in most cases actually move my hips once the heel was on to actually get any use from the heel hook. But to properly engage the heel and your glute and the hamstring, you point the toe and really pull on it. And this is where my foot was just pinging straight off the wall, and I just couldn't figure out why. I discovered that my foot was basically too perpendicular to the wall. It wasn't parallel with the wall. It was kind of pointing into the wall. So when I engaged the muscles required to actually put tension onto a heel hook and pointed the toe simply just pushed off the wall like a cam and just popped the heel out of the hold, rendering the whole process useless. So I really needed to focus on placing my foot sort of parallel to the wall like that, rather than like up and down perpendicular to the wall. And I realised that actually most of the time you're not actually using like this part of the heel, like the Achilles tendon part, that's what I would consider my heel, but you're not actually using that bit most of the time. Most of the time you're using like the side of the heel, this little rubber patch here, and you're really like pressing down on the hold and moving the shoe parallel to the wall so that it doesn't cam when you engage and point the toes. And practicing to use that part of the heel was the game changer for me. Too often I would just slam the heel on like that. As soon as the toes point, the heel just pops off. But as soon as I started really focusing on getting it parallel to the wall so that when I point my toes, it doesn't actually ping off the wall, that was when things started moving. Having said all that, it's very wholesome getting better with hard grit and tenacity, but what's even better is just getting better by just simply buying a product. So these shoes are new to me. I'm not sponsored by any shoe company, and I think the Scarpa Dragos are pretty good shoes. But the reason why these have changed the game for me is because of the fit. The issue I have is extremely narrow feet. So no matter how much I downsize my shoes, to the point where I'm in agony on the toes, the heel just always seems baggy. This wasn't really a problem on like big massive holds where I'm heel hooking, but as things started to get like sharper or smaller or really, really pointy, I noticed that particularly in my Scarpa Vapor Vs, that sometimes the shoe would actually just come off, like my heel would come clean out of the shoe. But a lot of the time it was like sort of scrunching up and deforming, and it just was not allowing me to really pull down on the hold. And it was really affecting my ability to heel hook. What I did was I just did a search for the lowest volume shoe available on the market, and apparently it's the Scarpa Drago LV, these ones here. These are the exact same size as my Vapor Vs, but you can even see just by holding them up that the heel is way, way smaller on these. For the record, I think these are great shoes. I've had 3 pairs of these, but when I started utilising heels a lot more, especially as things got a bit harder, like my heel was just popping out of these. And it was the same story with other shoes that I had. Like these Saltics were incredibly comfortable, but the heel just deforms terribly. These Red Chili Voltages, excellent toes, but again, just deforms on the heel just because my heel is not big enough to fill them out. The only pairs of shoes I've found that actually properly fit my heel are these Unparalleled Flagship LVs. I think these are the women's pair. And these Dragos. These are the narrowest heels I've found. From now on, basically, I'm just going to be wearing LV shoes or women's shoes. I also think that women's shoes just tend to come in better colours as well. The point I'm trying to make is the fit of the shoe, especially on the heel, obviously makes a massive difference. So if your heels are popping out of your shoes when you're heel hooking, try a low volume version of that shoe. Now that I had a tiny little bit of strength and robustness in my hamstring and a proper fitting shoe, I could start refining this technique and start actually making some improvements. As I've said already, the best way I've found to improve technique is to put drills into your 15-20 minute warm-up on easy climbs and really practice what you're trying to refine. In that warm-up, I tried to address the same issues I've had with my regular footwork, which is general sloppiness. Things like just simply bad placement of the heel, like just putting it on the bad part of the hold. Other things like not anticipating where your heel or your foot is going to end up after you do a rock over, because it actually moves quite a lot from that position to when you're fully rocked over. It like shifts over laterally quite a lot, and if you've not done that before, the anticipation of where you're going to end up is not something that's intuitive. and other things that require experience, like placing my heel above my hand if I'm doing a match, so I can actually watch it go into position rather than below my hand where I'm kind of just hoping that it sticks. To put it simply, more generally, I was just thinking about heel hook technique a little bit more during my warm-up, and it really, the results are plain to see for me anyway, because with climbing, as always, the devil is in the detail. So you can get the technique basically, but actually refining it so that you can use it effectively, especially when you go outside, that really pays dividends for me. And the more I do these things, the more I feel a little bit of strength and robustness in the muscles required, and a little increase in flexibility too, meaning I can just do better and better. And I think it's had a really noticeable improvement in my climbing. Actually, especially indoors, where I feel like route setters will sometimes deliberately try and set a really heinous heel hook for you. The best thing about these drills, all the pros that are telling you to do drills, is it's kind of free. Like, you're doing a warm-up anyway, right? So just, it's not any effort. You're just doing a slightly more focused version of your regular warm-up, and you get better for free. Like, I just feel like it's such a no-brainer to do this sort of thing. I can't get stronger or fitter in the warm-up, but I still have lots of room to get better at climbing in the warm-up, and that's really what I'm actually interested in. Anyway, ramble over. As you can tell, this week I'm really interested in heel hooks. Next week, who knows what it'll be. Thank you all very much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. As always, if you've got something to say, let's discuss in the comments. Let's have a discourse. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.